Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Peopling Podcast. I am your host, Christine Naruzzi, and it is my delight to be able to share with you today our VIP guest. And I bring to you Jeanne Belmonte. She comes to us from Virginia. She has a business degree in marketing and over 20 years of experience in commercial and nonprofit organizations. Her past roles include executive director and senior sales executive. And she finds points of connection with you and your team given her varied experience. And let me share with you this gift. I got it a few days ago. I jumped in, dove in face first, and I could not put it down. So it's called Peace of Mind at Work. It's a guidebook. And it's tools to bounce back in the midst of workplace difficulties and discord. And Jeanne, I can't wait for you to first off share a little bit about who you are in this world, and then we'll wind up finding out what led you to write this amazing workbook. I can't wait to talk to you about it and break it down. It's so good. But please, if you would, just share a little bit about who you are so that we can dive into what you know and what you got to share with us today.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This is absolutely a delight. I first can tell you that I'm half Irish and half Italian. All right. So that also means that I'm not necessarily, but half Jersey, half Texan. So growing up, I was half in New Jersey on my younger years and then down in Houston, Texas for my junior high and high school years. And talk about the first need to adjust to a whole new environment. Yeah, going into the sixth grade with an accent that I didn't know horseshoe was not the right way to say it. I thought that was okay. So all sorts of people relations and learning how to do that in a whole new environment started young for me. But I thought it would be fun to share that with you all. And then I did go on to work in a variety of sectors, yet with the same gift mix, with the same talents. So as mentioned, I was in the commercial world and the business world and sales and business to business. And some of my companies that I worked for, they both had offices and warehouses. And so I worked with folks in both environments, which was just great. And then also in the nonprofit world and a different nonprofits on both the West Coast and the East Coast, so in different parts of the country as well. And yes, when you have the executive director and the interim director, smaller organizations like I've been involved with, well, you do a little fundraising as well and some event planning. And then, here I am in the area of DC, and I would say it's kind of a rite of passage, at least for myself, to have become a government contractor. So I have done contracting. I've worked within government agencies here, and that's also been in the project management role, things along that line, and also people management too. So that rounds out some of the big sectors in which I've worked in with basically still the same talents. And that's a lot of the reason why I can find the different points of connection with folks, having worked in some different environments, yet with some of the same skill sets and in different parts of the country. As well, having both lived there and worked there.
Love that. Jeanne, what drew you to this field? Like, what was originally kind of stirring for you that wound up opening up that first door that opened up all the rest of the doors?
Well, the current world that I'm in is you just held up my book, right? And so they say that authors write to either express the pain that they've experienced, they want to share that, or they may seek solutions, right? So there are these two elements. And I think it's both for me. I've definitely felt the pain of the worry, the anger, the bitterness, the negative rumination that can happen after a perceived offense. Like after somebody has said something or done something to me, I've lost my peace of mind. And in that particular way, right? I definitely have felt that hit, and I've lost my peace of mind for too long, right? And so I felt that. And then I would say that also the element of being inspired, finding the solution. So I definitely was inspired to read about folks that also have interpersonal challenges. They've had perceived offenses too, but they stay engaged. They kept their sense of well-being. They kept this relationship the same way it was. They worked through They're a way of reducing any sort of stress that may have come up afterwards and just retain this relationship. And I'm thinking, that's really amazing. How can I share what appears to be their method, of doing this, with others and put it in a way that's, simple with tools that are really straightforward that can help others. It can help others reduce what I call distracting stress. It's that the anger, the bitterness, the negative rumination that can happen after you feel, that perceived offense and how to lessen that and then reap the benefits from lessening that.
Love that. Can you give us a definition of perceived offense? I think some of us might know it, but just making sure that we're understanding what you mean by this and give us an example in the workplace.
Sure. Well, you feel offended from your perspective. Somebody said something that you feel offended. So maybe you're in a meeting and an individual turns to you and says, "You didn't deliver the goods as well as you have in the past," right? Once again, your grammar is off. Let's say something like that, or the data hasn't come in accurate or correct. And it is your fault, but it was said out in the public, right? In front of your peers, maybe in front of your clients. And maybe it was your client that said it, right? It's not always, your peer or a manager. Sometimes it's your customer or it's, a client that says something and you feel that hit, right? That your perception is that hit you hard. And so then after you shake off that initial either feel of, fear or anger that can happen, well, then do you continue though to feel that anger, or is worry continuing, or the bitterness, rumination? That's what a lot of this addresses, is to reduce that. But that's the perceived offense. That's one example of so many. There's so many varieties.
So many. So I think a lot of people listening in going, "Oh, Jeanne's onto something here," right? I love my job, but I can't stand fill in the blank, right? Like Frank across the hall, or their boss or their teammate or colleague, but they love their responsibility. They love their duties. They love the outcome of what they bring to their role. Tell us a little bit. And I know you've got all the answers because I was just chewing this up, reading your workbook. I've heard it said so many different ways that people don't quit companies or jobs. They quit bad managers. A lot of times the work environment, the culture can feel just such a certain way that it's like, I can't be productive right now. And there's almost no way to separate that part of us at work from home. Like there's no way you can come home feeling like the best version of being a great spouse or a great parent when you just got beat up all day at work with these perceived offenses. So wherever you'd like to start in the 13 questions I just asked of you, I know people are like, "Oh my gosh, give me more." Would you just start breaking that down for us?
Sure. In the book, I share studies that really validate our experiences, right? So there's a terrific study in the Harvard Business Review that speaks about incivility that can happen. And it can happen and it can come to you from outside of the organization. Sometimes it's a customer, sometimes it's a client. It's not always, within your four walls or within your Zoom or your Teams meeting, right? You can perceive it from outside, but with associates that are outside of your organization too. And so when the incivility occurs, there's statistics out there. And just a few of them I want to share because I totally relate. And maybe the people that are listening will, relate as well. And so one of them is that at least 60% of the folks admit that they lose time at work avoiding the person. Like they're not working because they're avoiding them. They're spending time going down the hallway that way or some other way in which they're try not to engage, with that person, right? And then also there's, over 65% of the folks admit that their performance declines, right? So you can imagine when you're preoccupied with this state of your anger or your worry or your bitterness, your negative rumination, whichever it may be for you, folks will admit to decline in performance as well. And then over 80% of the folks, they share that they lose work time worrying about what just happened. I relate. I completely relate to that. That's where I have a heart for it because that is something that affects so many of us. I relate to it. And I would also like to have relief from it as well, right? And relief that comes sooner than later, right? So that state of what I call distracting stress, it doesn't last so long. It is shortened by me for sure. So that's why I want to share some of those stats because it's like I said, it validates my experience and maybe the folks here as well.
So you've probably experienced it yourself as an employee someplace, right? And then also you've been part of it or witnessed it as a leader, being an executive director or the senior sales executive. And you're looking at this or even, pulled into it somehow. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is so standing in the way of our ultimate mission and our goal. And, we've got the vision printed up on the wall, but these two people over here are keeping any of that from happening. What kind of guidance or recommendation could you give to somebody if they're like, oh my gosh, you're saving my life right now? Like, I love my job. When I go into the workplace, a little part of me dies every day because of fill in the blank, right?
Yes, right. So the answer is within us. For sure it is. So we already have strategies, stress reducing strategies that we use to reduce that particular state of mind, that the anger, the worry, the bitterness, the negative rumination. We already have those. So the opportunity is to raise awareness. Just think of the top two of those that you use and peel the onion on them. Understand why they work for you. So the why that they work for you is because they fill a basic human need. But we usually just don't think about it that way. You're either filling an emotional need, a mental need, a spiritual need, or a physical need when you activate one of your stress reducing strategies. And just raising that awareness can help you choose really purposefully, right? Really mindfully in order to reduce that state that you're in, which you've lost your peace of mind with it. You don't have it. You're the one that goes home, stressed and continues through the day that way. Yes, you have some breaks, but to really resolve it with that particular situation is definitely a choice. And then you look at your strategies and you look at the needs that are depleted, your own needs that are depleted, and choose the healthy way to fill them, and the book is not prescriptive. Yes, it has examples, but it isn't prescriptive because you know what works for you. And then the why, the basic human need that's depleted at the moment, only you know which that is. And it's just four to consider. And you do have the answer within and the pathway to reduce that negative state and reap the benefits, to restore that sense of well-being for yourself. And it is definitely so much the gift that you give for yourself. It's definitely self-care.
Golly, that's so powerful. I'm over here going, I think a lot of times people want to figure out how to fix Frank. How do I fix him? How do I make him stop doing that? And what you just said is like, no, the power is in yourself and it's being able to see what you can control. And what you can control is yourself and how you respond to what's going on around you. I think that's so important. You used a couple of people in your book that we could relate to, right? There's Sam and there's Taylor, and we get to know them almost as a story unfolding. We get to see this character development, and it just makes it so real life that it's almost like I'm sitting there witnessing these two people at the conference table, right? As the meeting is concluding, and Sam just ramrolled all over Taylor. It was just like, wow, what just happened? Didn't see it at all. Like that was just the way that Sam communicates. And I might be screwing up the character, so I apologize to anybody who reads this afterwards. And they're like, no, it wasn't Sam, it was Elliot, right? But I love the imagery that is presented because it's a workbook. And a lot of times a workbook feels like homework. But what I love about the way that you portrayed it is it's almost like a real life story that could absolutely take place in any kind of work environment. Plug in a different name and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this person reminds me exactly of, right? And then you get to ask yourself questions about what are these things that bother me? How are the things that I can handle and approach it and control? And it's just this extraordinary. So, what led you to write the book?
Well, the element of either the pain point that you want to, share and explore, and also the solution. So being inspired to read about real life situations. So these case studies are based on real life situations of Riley and Taylor. They're the ones that have had that dialogue, in different settings. And then Sam is the one main fictional character that's in there that has that distracting stress after the incident. Taylor is also on the receiving end as well and doesn't necessarily have that reaction. That's the person that I was reading about that was like, wow, that's just amazing that they come from that. And then Sam represents the 80%, 65% that are really being distracted by the worry or the performance is going down or they're avoiding the person, right? And so, that putting that person in reflects like I said, the large percentage of folks that are shown, in these reports that are out there. And I'll tell you, you could see that Taylor is just the person that already has the strategies in here and in here, in the head and the heart, right? They're already functioning, they're already firing, and they're private, right? It's not put out on the table. And just like your own strategies, many can be right inside of your head or heart only, private, only known to you, and therefore even all the more powerful that you can activate them. And they're always tied to the basic human needs. And just a little bit of that reflection can help make it super powerful.
It's extraordinary because you're helping people to build a skill set. And the outflow or the outcome from this is more profitable companies, more in tune and productive and purpose-driven employees. You've got this team that is actually firing on all cylinders. They're doing what they want to do, what their God-given gifts and skill sets are, instead of, running to the bathroom for the 14th time to avoid, right? Frank. So I think it's practical advice. It's really elevating a skill set. And I love that it's from learned experience and then also data driven from your research. What would be your takeaway if somebody just ignored this? They're listening and they're like, welcome to my life. I show up, I do what I can. I try to manage it the way I can. I go home and I self-medicate to try to forget that in a few hours, I got to wake up and do it all over again. There's a lot on the line there, isn't it? If we don't address it.
Yes, most definitely. And the opportunity is for a daily self-care, right? For you to give yourself that gift of reflecting what strategies work for you. What are ones that you haven't tried yet? And that's an opportunity when you're looking at the book and when you're talking to other folks, just hearing what other folks are doing, but it doesn't mean it's for you. You have to know if that is actually going to fill one of your primary basic human needs and what's depleted. A question that you can just answer yourself is that, look at it. Is my sense of belonging low? That can really happen after a perceived offense. You can be pulling back and your sense of belonging or your sense of value can go down. Those are emotional needs that need to be filled. And so what are the healthy ways to fill those? You know what they are for you. You know your path. So this isn't prescriptive, but you know whom is somebody that can fill you in that particular way. You know who you reach out to. You know things and ways that you can change your own thought in order to elevate, right? A sense of belonging. Once again, it's the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical needs that you can look to fill. And when you're identifying what's depleted, well, then you know which category it is, right? And then you can start to seek healthy ways to fill those.
Before we dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to take a quick moment to share a tool that has significantly improved my life, and that's called Growth Day. It's like having world-class mentors right in your pocket. There are daily challenges that help grow your confidence, your inspiration, and your drive. Check out the show notes for your link to a free trial, and don't let another moment pass you by without checking out Growth Day. Jeanne, thank you so much for sharing what you have so far. We've talked a lot about we tend to be very reactive, or we respond a certain way to people in our workforce and our teams, but I know you've got a secret sauce about how to not be reactive, but proactive. Would you share that with us?
Sure. There's an opportunity that once you have, cleared your slate internally, you have coped well with any past perceived offense. It's no longer a block for you. You are once again so fully engaged and your energy is back up and you're just feeling all in again. Right. So there's an opportunity to start doing a proactive strategy that's also very private. And there's also an opportunity to do the same strategy when you're just meeting a new colleague or meeting a new customer or a client. And I call it profound respect. So profound respect has, three elements, and the first two are really quite close to one another. So it's considering the whole person and it's valuing them as a fellow human being. So those two go together. They happen, very much concurrently. And then the third one is as you're also getting to know that person or recalling if it's a person that you already know, so you can then empathize with them. And it could be happy experiences that you empathize, and it can be hard experiences that they've shared with you or that you believe that they're having, in which that store of empathy is going into your own memory. You are starting to capture positive memories about that person, right? And especially if it's somebody brand new, that's all you're pulling in. You're just getting to know them and you're just taking it in, right? And you're doing this because it does feel good to offer profound respect. It does build you up internally in a subtle way. And then also, if down the road a perceived offense happens, that person says something and you perceive it as what a hit. I can't believe that was said or done. You, yes, will have a natural first reaction of fear or anger. Something will flash and you'll shake it off in one way or another. That's completely natural and it gets done. But then you also have within your mind and in your heart a positive memory about that person that can give you the capability of offering the benefit of the doubt, just something that is a relief for you when you offer somebody the benefit of the doubt right in here, in your mind, in your heart. And then with that frame of mind, not distracting stress isn't taking over that distance to you. The benefit of the doubt allows you to then, lean in and ask that person, did I hear you right? Is that what you meant? Or did you mean it like this? Or this is how I received it, right? You can stay engaged and understand better, what's going on, and your perception may change. It's a whole dialogue. We don't know where to go. There's so many what ifs, but creating the space of the benefit of the doubt for that person is so good for you and good for keeping this relationship and dialogue and understanding going. And I mean, wouldn't you like to receive the benefit of the doubt too?
Absolutely. I love that. In relationship counseling, I've heard it said that you have to put deposits into the bank, and that's where you pull from when you need something. Have you ever had anybody in your life that just takes without any kind of giving? Even if it's just a mental account of these things that helps elevate somebody in your viewpoint with that profound respect. First of all, I love the title of this, Profound Respect. It's so powerful. I read once from the Arbinger Institute, Leadership and Self-Deception. Did you ever read that book?
It sounds great.
It is extraordinary. And the main takeaway out of that book is that a lot of times we tend to see others as objects. So we objectify people. Picture this. You're sitting in traffic trying to leave DC to get home to Virginia. That's only a couple miles up the road, but it's hours away in the wrong time of traffic, right? And you're like, this traffic. But what if there were an overhead sign that said, remember, you are the traffic, right? Oftentimes we're part of it too. So what I heard you say through that lens is you're seeing the whole person and you're seeing what they're contributing in the world, on the team, to this project. And it helps to see what you can appreciate about them as opposed to what our differences are. I think in our current world, it's really easy to start off pointing out things about somebody that's different or something that I don't necessarily like right away because it's different instead of finding those commonalities or appreciating the differences. So I love that perspective because we can't get to empathy until you see the whole person and you have that respect added up. What an extraordinary perspective to come from. And what if we implemented this with the next new relationship that could start at work? I wonder what our work environment could feel like. I wonder what could shift in the culture. I've heard it said it takes as little as 3% of the workforce to start shifting the culture, good or bad. Wouldn't that be an extraordinary place to go?
Yeah. And how at peace you will be more often, right? And how,
Bingo.
yeah,
Bingo.
it's
I've worked in some really unusual and hard to work at places. I'll give you an example. It was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. I worked at Home Depot when I was putting myself through college. And so some mornings I had to be there to open up at 6 a.m. Sometimes I was closing the store at 9 or 10 p.m. And it's hard. It's a hard work environment. You're standing on concrete for 8 hours a shift. You're working with people who are probably like really stressed out. They're in the middle of a DIY project or their toilet won't flush at home. Or they just messed something up and they've come in to spend money to try to get it fixed. We're working with people in all different kinds of situations. And then you've got teammates. Some of them don't want to put in the physical labor, right? Some of them just want to go and hide in a corner and not help other clients or customers or whatever. I remember being in that work environment, you've got people of all different walks and backgrounds. And it was really, really challenging. It was very challenging. So what you're saying here, trying to envision like how different my department would have been if I could have seen the people that I worked with in that profound respect lens where I was looking for things to build up about them in my mindset. Like I probably would have shown up very different to them, which would have had them showing up very different to me. Wow. Yeah, that's extraordinary. Okay. Tell us, what is one place that somebody could start? They're hearing this and they're going, oh my gosh, Jeanne, you are singing exactly what I need in my life. So besides the obvious, which is buying the book, which you can find in the show notes, a link to it and get it ASAP, right? What's something that you could share with our audience to implement almost right away? They show up to work tomorrow, and what's one thing, in addition to that profound respect, that could help shift these relationships and communication in their workplace?
Sure. Well, do a quick personal inventory. It takes a second for you to know if there is any residual distracting stress for you, if there's any residual anger, bitterness, worry, negative rumination about an incident. It'll flash up to you and then reflect on that and think, okay, how motivated am I, A, for physical health? Because some people are in physical health mode. And it is healthy to reduce that sort of distracting stress. The cortisol level goes up. The studies show it. It's in the book as well. Hey, that can be quite motivating, right? In order for you to then choose a healthy strategy for you that will reduce that particular distracting stress about that particular incident and that particular person, because you're motivated for good health. You may be motivated, like we said, for some of the other reasons, to fill your spiritual bucket or your emotional, your mental. You're going to know what's depleted, and especially around that incident that happened, and to really purposefully choose the strategy that will fill that bucket, fill those buckets, and relieve that sort of a tension that you have about that particular situation that will help you then show up in a different way when working with that person, right? So there's an opportunity. It's helping your peace of mind increase and the other sort of stress decrease. And that does help you show up differently for so many people.
So good. Before you wrote and published your book, you were presenting some of these techniques in workshops. Were you able to witness it right then and there when somebody had a breakthrough or an aha moment? Is there a story that you can share with us that really stands out to you about this shift that probably changed somebody's life as far as relationship?
Well, in the workshop, the small groups help to create a collective personal action plan. And so you heard that Sam in the book is in that state in different times and for different reasons. And in the workshop, folks brainstorm among each other and just share, different strategies, either they've learned or they've used or they've read about. It could come, the knowledge can come in all different ways, and they're talking about it, get to know each other, all that sort of good stuff. And then you lay in the next part of, all right, unpacking what these basic human needs are. Harvard Business Review, that study gives us some examples of what emotional, mental, your spiritual, and physical ones are fillable at work and during the workday. All right, this is another thing. The strategies have to be something that can be done during the workday, or if you're on an evening shift, during the evening shift, because it's something that you can resolve that day. And that's the one parameter. Because peace of mind at work, okay. So these strategies have to be doable then in that time period. And so folks work within that parameter and then share. They report out, and you can just see the richness of the conversations. So I can't point to one particular. I just can see this whole collective right now of folks reporting out, digging deep into an example strategy, and nodding along. Studies even show that empathy can reduce also the emotional and mental strain of that distracting stress, and therefore your body is in a better place. Folks are like, yeah, that's right. I can relate to that, or I've heard that a study like that before too, and then want to move in that way. So it's collective aha moments that I've seen as folks, create, one big plan and kind of unpack and explore different ways of looking at things.
I love that. And, you've had this experience in the corporate world, in sales, in nonprofit organizations, and as a government contractor. So I'm sure there's no angle of any of those organizations that is exempt from people problems. We all have people problems.
Well, there's also a section for managers. So I may have mentioned a little bit earlier about, challenges that managers have, how to coach our wonderful direct reports, or what if our direct reports make a mistake? How do we keep our peace of mind in the midst of that? So I definitely want to flag that there are management case studies as well, and opportunity to leverage your personal action plan, that intersection between go-to strategies that you have and basic human needs that it fills, and how some of those strategies you may learn just by looking at them from a different angle. Hey, I can use that while I'm managing others, while I'm preparing for certain meetings with my direct reports, or after direct reports, like I said, makes a mistake. Things like that. And putting in your own example of a challenging situation. There are blank sections in the book that are just for you to reflect what is exactly your situation and how and what is going to help you reduce that particular distracting stress.
Think this is so viable because I have seen it over and over and over again, where a lot of times a manager was a person inside of that department, that team, that, company, and they were exceptional at what they did. And so they got promoted to lead others. But that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand that they know how to communicate, know how to inspire, lead others, know how to manage friction in themselves and between other people. And so I think that was one of the things that was really like a spotlight in your workbook for me, is that you're helping to give guidance to somebody who may not have had formal training otherwise on how to address this, how to communicate well through it, and protect people. I've had managers in the past make me feel like the smallest speck of dust on the earth. And it's like, and now you want me to go and perform for you. Also, right? Like it created the opposite effect. Not only did I go and spend work time probably going and looking for a different employer, but I was like, well, I'll show you, and would almost self-sabotage to make sure that that person wouldn't win either. And I I bet I'm not alone in that. I'm not proud of it. Confessions from Christy here. I'm not proud of it. But when we get hurt, sometimes we do things that in hindsight we're not really proud of. I'm sure I had plenty of ownership in the problem that I was being reprimanded for. But I think my point here is the way we say things and communicate things and lead people through situations is so bloody important. If you want to have team members and people around you that all link up together and say, let's accomplish this purpose, let's finish this task, whatever the case is. So, Jeanne, inside of your workbook, you show us how to create a personal action plan. So, what's the goal out of that? What's the outcome? What can somebody expect when they put together a personal action plan?
So, one of the outcomes is that your sense of control increases, because sometimes you feel like it's decreased when you're in that state of difficulties and discord and you're in that state of anger and such. And that sense of control increases because you have really peeled your own on your back. It doesn't take much for you to really determine what of these four basic human needs are being filled when I go to my favorite manager, when I go ahead and talk to my best friend. Which is it? I talk to my partner, or you do something that's very private and internal to you. Something, it could be applying empathy, many other elements, things can fill your basic human needs. And for you to just raise awareness of that, because we feel them all the time without even thinking about it, but just giving yourself the gift of just peeling the onion back a little bit, sketching it down there and going, yeah, that's why I do this. Because maybe that person isn't going to be available when you need them in that moment. You're like, oh, I want some relief now. But you can reflect and say, okay, what am I seeking? I am seeking actually a sense of belonging. It's a shot. Who else? How else? What else can I do? You've already explored that for yourself. Like the answer is more readily there because you've already given it a little bit of thought, and you can get the relief that you want very purposefully and sooner than later. It's about releasing that sort of stress and coming back to that sense of peace of mind sooner than later. And by doing that personal action plan for yourself, you can restore to that state more quickly on a regular basis. And as I said, once again, when a particular strategy isn't available at the moment, you can then think of, because you've already mapped it out, where else, who else, and what else you can do for yourself.
That is so empowering. I love that. And it's something that we can implement into our personal life, into our relationships, whether it's parent kid, spousal, and then of course in the workplace. It's really extraordinary and transfers over well. And what I love most about what you said is it's the things that I can control. It's empowering. inside of me, not necessarily me seeking it out of other people. Because what, like my mom fills up my cup all the time, but if she's like out and about and not taking my phone call, I'm like, Mom, I need you right now. Love that. Awesome. Jeanne, this has been just so amazing. I love what you have shared with us and the impact that you've had just by the knowledge that you've expressed. And I think that just knowing that the power lies within myself as far as how I experience my work environment, my sense of self-belonging, all of those things that can sometimes kick us down a little bit and make us feel a certain way that's not excitable and passionate about our work. You're showing us how we can create that within ourselves and maybe ignite that into other people as well. I think it's really extraordinary information, and I just thank you so much for it. But before we conclude our time together, I'd like to ask you your contribution to our Be the Change challenge. So, this small portion in my book, we talk about Gandhi's well known verse about being the change in the world that you'd like to see. And so, my question for you is, what advice could you give to our listeners that we could implement starting today and have a positive impact on connection and communication for those in our sphere?
Um, with that activation of taking, a couple of your strategies, digging deep under them, just peeling it back, knowing which needs are being filled, acting upon it, and opening that space up for you then to apply profound respect, something that's proactive towards that person that, well, you used to have a perceived defense. You used to be in that state, but it's behind you now. You have coped well. And now you have this bandwidth within you to now look at them in a different way, in a lens of profound respect. That definitely brings you peace. It builds you up as well, and also gives you an opportunity to, get to know that person in a different way.
That is relationship shifting right there. That is so good. That is powerful, empowering, and very nurturing, self-nurturing as well. Jeanne, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. Friends, I've got all of Jeanne Belmonte's information in our show notes. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. I've got a link to her book, her website, and who knows, you might be seeing her at a workshop in your space coming soon to you to have a positive and profound impact in workplaces all over our great country. So, Jeanne, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Awesome. See y'all next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Peopling Podcast, and grab your copy of the Peopling book on Amazon, and let's keep this connection movement going. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep peopling like you mean it.